The reins slipped through Helena Jensen's fingers like water the moment the rattlesnake struck at her mare's front hooves, and in that terrible instant she knew she was going to die on this dusty Colorado road with nothing but sagebrush and mountains as witnesses to her final moments. The buggy lurched forward as Daisy, her normally docile chestnut mare, transformed into a wild creature driven by pure terror. Helena's hands scrambled desperately for the leather straps that now whipped uselessly in the wind, dancing just beyond her reach as the lightweight buggy bounced and careened over the uneven terrain leading away from Aspen. It was July of 1882, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the high country, turning the world into shades of gold and dust. She could hear her own voice screaming, though it sounded distant and strange, swallowed by the thunder of hooves and the violent rattling of the buggy wheels. The packages she had picked up from the general store flew from the seat beside her. Fabric, coffee, sugar, all the supplies she had carefully selected that morning scattered like confetti across the road. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs as she gripped the edge of the buggy seat with both hands, her knuckles white with the effort. The world became a blur of motion and sound. She could see the road ahead dipping down toward a rocky ravine, and her mind filled with images of the buggy overturning, of her body broken among the stones. Then she saw him. A rider appeared from the tree line to her left, his horse already at full gallop. He was leaning low over the animal's neck, his dark hat pulled tight against the wind of his speed. Helena had no time to wonder who he was or where he had come from. She only knew that he was moving to intercept her runaway buggy with the kind of reckless courage that seemed insane and miraculous in equal measure. The cowboy's horse was a magnificent bay stallion, powerful and sure-footed despite the dangerous speed. Helena watched in frozen terror and hope as he closed the distance, his horse eating up the ground between them with great lunging strides. She could see his face now, set in fierce concentration, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on Daisy. He urged his horse alongside the panicked mare, reaching out with one gloved hand. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Helena thought he would miss. The buggy hit a rut and bounced violently, nearly throwing her from her seat. She clung harder, her fingers aching, her whole body braced for impact. But the cowboy adjusted, his horsemanship flawless, and his hand closed around Daisy's bridle. The mare fought him, tossing her head and trying to pull away, but he held firm. His muscles strained visibly even through his shirt as he began to slow both horses, speaking words Helena could not hear over the chaos but could see in the movement of his lips. Gradually, impossibly, the mad flight began to ease. Daisy's gallop became a canter, then a trot. And finally, blessedly, both animals came to a trembling halt in the middle of the road. Helena sat frozen, unable to move or speak. Her entire body shook with the aftershock of terror, and her breath came in short, sharp gasps that made her dizzy. The world seemed too bright, too real, as if she had passed through death's door and emerged into a place that looked like life, but felt fundamentally changed. "Madam, are you hurt?" The cowboy's voice broke through her shock. He had dismounted and stood beside the buggy, one hand still gripping Daisy's bridle while the other reached toward Helena. His face was deeply tanned from years under the sun, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. Those eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like the mountain lakes above Aspen, and they held genuine concern. "Madam, can you hear me?" Helena's voice came out as barely a whisper. She tried again. "I am not hurt. I think. I do not know. Let me help you down." His voice was steady, calm in a way that helped anchor her back to reality. "You are safe now. The horse is calm." Helena accepted his hand, surprised by the strength in it as he guided her down from the buggy seat. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, and he caught her elbow, steadying her with easy competence. "Easy now," he said softly. "The fear takes a while to leave the body. Just breathe." She did as he instructed, drawing in long breaths of the hot afternoon air. It smelled of dust and sage and horse, familiar scents that helped ground her further. As her heart began to slow to something approaching normal, she became acutely aware of the man standing beside her. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for his living. His dark brown hair curled slightly where it touched his collar, and his face, while weathered, was handsome in a rugged, honest way. Thank, thank you, Helena managed, her voice stronger now. You saved my life. That snake spooked Daisy, and I could not hold the reins. I thought I was going to die. Name is Vincent Garrett, he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both formal and natural. I work at the Double Creek Ranch about 5 miles west of town. I was heading into Aspen when I saw your trouble. Helena Jensen, she replied, finding her manners despite her rattled state. My father owns the boarding house in town. I was bringing supplies back from the store. Vincent looked down the road at the scattered packages, then back at her with something that might have been a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, Miss Jensen, it looks like we have some collecting to do. Why don't you sit in the shade of that cottonwood while I gather your things? That way you can catch your breath proper. Helena wanted to protest that she was perfectly capable of helping, but her legs still felt unsteady, and she recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. She walked to the tree he had indicated and sank down onto the grass beneath it, watching as Vincent moved efficiently along the road, collecting her scattered purchases. Daisy stood where he had left her, head down and sides still heaving slightly from her exertion. The mare's panic had completely subsided, leaving her looking almost sheepish, if such an expression could be attributed to a horse. Vincent checked her carefully, running his hands down her legs and examining her hooves before he began his collection work. As Helena watched him work, she found herself noticing details she'd been too frightened to register before. The way he moved with easy grace despite his size. The gentleness in his hands as he handled her purchases, taking care with the fabric that had partially unrolled across a bush. The quiet way he spoke to both horses, his voice too low for her to hear the words but clearly soothing to the animals. When he returned with his arms full, he set everything carefully in the buggy before walking over to join her in the shade. He removed his hat, revealing the full extent of his sun-streaked brown hair, and held it in his hands as he looked down at her. Everything is accounted for except the coffee, he said with obvious regret. The bag split open when it hit the rocks. I'm sorry about that. You're apologizing? Helena could not help the slight laugh that escaped her. You just saved my life, Mr. Garrett, and you are concerned about a bag of coffee? For the first time, she saw him truly smile, and it transformed his face completely. The serious, focused expression she had first seen gave way to something warmer, almost boyish despite the weathering of his features. Well, good coffee is important, he said, and there was humor in his voice that made her smile in return. They stood there in the shade, looking at each other, and Helena felt something shift in her chest. It was not just gratitude, though she certainly felt that, in abundance. It was something else, something she could not quite name, a recognition that resonated in a place deeper than conscious thought. How long have you worked at Double Creek? She asked, partly from genuine curiosity and partly from a sudden, powerful desire to keep him talking, to keep him here in this moment with her. Coming up on 3 years now, Vincent replied. He settled his weight against the tree trunk, clearly in no hurry to leave. I drifted around some before that, worked cattle drives up from Texas, spent a season in Wyoming, but Colorado suited me. The mountains make me feel like I can breathe proper. I know what you mean, Helena said. We moved here from Kansas 5 years ago. My father wanted to start fresh after my mother died. The plains felt too empty after we lost her, like the flatness itself was a reminder of absence. But here, with the mountains all around, it feels like the world is full again. Vincent's expression softened with understanding. I'm sorry about your mother. That must have been hard on you and your father both. It was, Helena admitted, but we made our way through it. The boarding house has done well. People are still coming to Aspen, drawn by the silver mines and the promise of opportunity. We stay full most of the time. I have heard good things about the Jensen boarding house, Vincent said. The men talk sometimes about where they would stay if they came to town for more than a night. Your place gets mentioned favorably. Helena felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at the compliment. We try to make it welcoming. Father does most of the business management, but I handle the cooking and the household matters. It keeps us both busy. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sound of the horses' breathing and the rustle of cottonwood leaves overhead. Helena found herself reluctant to break the moment, to return to the practical necessities that would pull them apart. But the sun was moving west, and she knew her father would worry if she did not return soon. I should get back, she said finally, though the words felt heavy in her mouth. Father will be concerned if I'm much later. Of course, Vincent said, straightening from the tree. Let me follow you back to town, just to make sure Daisy stays calm. You do not have to do that, Helena protested, even as relief flooded through her at the offer. You have already done so much. It would ease my mind, Vincent said simply. Besides, I still need to get those supplies I was heading into town for anyway. It is no trouble at all. They walked back to the road together, and Vincent helped her up into the buggy seat with the same steady courtesy he had shown throughout. He gathered Daisy's reins and placed them firmly in Helena's hands, his fingers lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. Keep a firm grip, he said, looking up at her with those remarkable eyes. But do not strangle them. The horse can feel your tension through the leather. Stay calm, and she will stay calm too. Helena nodded, concentrating on the feel of the reins in her hands, on the connection between herself and the mare. Vincent mounted his own horse with fluid ease and positioned himself beside the buggy. Ready? He asked. Ready, Helena confirmed, and they started down the road toward Aspen at an easy walk. The journey back to town gave Helena time to observe Vincent more fully. He rode with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent countless hours in the saddle, his body moving with the horse's rhythm as naturally as breathing. He kept up a steady stream of quiet conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area that kept her mind occupied and her hands steady on the reins. He told her about the elk he had seen last winter, coming down from the high country in a herd so large it took an hour to pass. He described the hidden meadows up in the mountains where wildflowers bloomed in carpets of color each spring. He talked about the ranch where he worked, about the owner, Mr. Crawford, who was fair but demanding, about the other hands who had become something like brothers to him over the past 3 years. Helena found herself talking, too, more than she usually did with strangers. She told him about the challenges of running a boarding house, about the interesting characters who passed through, about her dreams of maybe expanding someday, adding more rooms, or perhaps even starting a small restaurant. She talked about her father, about how he had found purpose again in building something new after losing everything that mattered in Kansas. By the time Aspen came into view, nestled in its valley with the mountains rising dramatically on all sides, Helena felt as if she had known Vincent Garrett for far longer than a single afternoon. There was an ease between them that usually took weeks or months to develop, a comfort that felt both strange and absolutely right. The boarding house sat on Galena Street, a 2-story building that her father had painted a cheerful yellow the previous summer. Flower boxes graced the windows, filled with petunias and geraniums that Helena tended carefully. It looked welcoming and homey, exactly as they had intended. Vincent helped her down from the buggy once more, then began unloading her packages. Helena's father appeared in the doorway, his face creased with concern that smoothed into relief when he saw her. Helena, I was starting to worry, Harold Jensen said, walking down the steps. He was a man in his early 50s, with graying hair and a solid build that spoke of physical work. You were gone longer than expected. There was trouble on the road, Father, Helena said quickly. Daisy spooked at a snake and ran away with the buggy. I would have been killed if Mr. Garrett had not been there to stop her. Harold's face went pale, then flushed with emotion. He turned to Vincent with an expression of profound gratitude. You saved my daughter's life? I was in the right place at the right time, Vincent said, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Any man would have done the same. Not any man could have done what you did, Helena interjected firmly. Not many riders could have caught a runaway horse and stopped it safely. Mr. Garrett is being too modest. Harold gripped Vincent's hand and shook it vigorously. I am in your debt, sir, truly and completely. How can I ever repay you? Vincent looked distinctly uncomfortable now, shifting his weight and glancing at Helena as if for rescue. She took pity on him. Father, Mr. Garrett still needs to get his supplies from town before the stores close. Perhaps we should not keep him too long. Of course, Harold said, though he seemed reluctant to release Vincent's hand. But you must come to dinner. Tonight, tomorrow night, any night this week. Please, I insist. It would mean a great deal to both of us. Vincent hesitated, and Helena found herself holding her breath, surprised by how much she wanted him to say yes. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, some unspoken question and answer that made her pulse quicken. I would be honored, Vincent said finally, his gaze still locked with Helena's. "If it is not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Harold assured him. "How about tomorrow evening? Say around 6 o'clock? That should give you time to finish your work for the day." "Tomorrow at 6, Vincent agreed. He put his hat back on, touching the brim in that gesture Helena was already beginning to find endearing. "I will see you then, Miss Jensen, Mr. Jensen." Helena watched him ride away down Galena Street, her hand raised in a small wave when he turned back to look at her one last time before disappearing around a corner. Even after he was gone, she could still feel the imprint of his presence, as if he had left something of himself behind in the warm afternoon air. "He seems like a good man," Harold said quietly beside her. "He is," Helena agreed, not taking her eyes from the empty street. "He really is." That night, Helena found it difficult to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived those terrible moments of panic when the buggy had careened out of control. But then Vincent would appear in her memories, fearless and sure, risking his own safety to save hers. She remembered the strength in his hands, the steadiness of his voice, the way his eyes had held such genuine concern for her well-being. She rose before dawn, unable to lie still any longer, and threw herself into preparations for the evening meal with an energy that made her father raise his eyebrows over breakfast. "Are you making something special?" he asked, watching her check their supplies with unusual intensity. "I thought I would make a proper Sunday dinner," Helena said, trying to sound casual. "Roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, maybe an apple pie. We have guests staying with us who would appreciate it, and Mr. Garrett deserves a good meal after what he did." Harold smiled but said nothing, returning to his newspaper with an expression that suggested he understood far more than Helena wanted him to. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Helena worked through her usual chores, changing linens in the guest rooms, washing dishes, sweeping floors, all while her mind wandered constantly to the coming evening. She changed her dress 3 times before finally settling on a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. It was not fancy, nothing inappropriate for a simple dinner, but it was flattering, and she could not quite suppress the desire to look her best. At precisely 6 o'clock, Vincent appeared at the front door, freshly washed and dressed in clean clothes, his hat in his hands. Helena opened the door, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, both smiling. "Good evening, Miss Jensen," he said. "Good evening, Mr. Garrett," she replied. "Please, come in." The boarding house dining room was a large, comfortable space with 2 long tables that could seat 20 people when full. Tonight, only 1 table was set, with their regular boarders clustered at one end and a special place laid for Vincent at the other, between Helena and her father. The other guests were miners mostly, hard-working men who appreciated good food and clean lodgings, and they greeted Vincent with friendly nods. Dinner was a success. The roast beef was tender and flavorful, the potatoes perfectly seasoned, the bread warm and fresh from the oven. Helena had outdone herself, and she could see Vincent's appreciation in every bite he took. But more than the food, it was the conversation that made the evening special. Vincent talked more about his work at the ranch, describing the challenges of managing cattle in the high country, the constant vigilance required against predators and harsh weather. He spoke with obvious love for the land and the animals, with respect for the other men he worked alongside. Harold asked questions about ranching practices, genuinely interested, and Vincent answered thoughtfully, showing a depth of knowledge that came from real experience rather than book learning. Helena found herself watching Vincent's hands as he talked, noticing the calluses earned from hard work, the careful way he handled his utensils, the expressiveness of his gestures. She caught herself and looked away, only to find her father watching her with knowing eyes that made her blush. After dinner, Harold excused himself to attend to some paperwork, leaving Helena and Vincent alone in the front parlor. It was not improper. The door stood open, and other boarders moved occasionally through the hall, but it felt intimate nonetheless, a space carved out just for the 2 of them. "Your father seems like a good man," Vincent said, settling into one of the comfortable chairs by the window. "He is," Helena agreed, taking the chair opposite him. "Losing my mother nearly broke him, but he found his way back. This boarding house was his salvation in many ways. It gave him purpose again, something to build." "How old were you when she passed?" Vincent asked gently. 16, Helena said. Old enough to understand what we were losing, but young enough to feel lost without her guidance. She was the one who taught me to cook, to manage a household, to find joy in the small daily tasks that make a house a home. I think of her every day, especially when I'm working in the kitchen. It feels like keeping her alive in some small way. Vincent nodded slowly. I lost my mother young, too. I was only 10. My father followed her within a year, just seemed to give up on living. I was raised by my uncle after that, a rancher down in New Mexico. He was a hard man but fair, taught me everything I know about cattle and horses. He is gone now, too, passed on about 5 years back. So we are both orphans of a sort, Helena said softly. I suppose we are, Vincent agreed, though at least we were lucky enough to have people who cared about us, who taught us how to make our way in the world. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories and dreams, discovering the 100 small ways in which their lives had prepared them for this meeting. Vincent told her about his hope to one day own his own ranch, nothing huge, just enough land to run a modest herd and build a life. Helena confessed her secret dream of writing a cookbook someday, collecting all the recipes her mother had taught her and adding her own variations, creating something that would last beyond her own lifetime. When Vincent finally rose to leave, both of them were reluctant to end the evening. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart race. May I call on you again, Miss Jensen? He asked formally. Not just because of your father's invitation, but because I would very much like to see you again. I would like that too, Helena said, not bothering to hide her smile. Very much. How about this Sunday after church? Maybe we could take a walk if the weather holds and you have no other obligations. I have no other obligations, Helena assured him quickly. A walk would be lovely. He left then, but not before their hands brushed in farewell, a touch that seemed to carry the weight of everything unspoken between them. Sunday could not come fast enough for Helena. She attended church services with her father as always, sitting in their usual pew and trying to concentrate on the sermon. But her eyes kept drifting to the back of the church where Vincent sat with some of the other ranch hands, and more than once she caught him looking back at her with a small smile that made her forget whatever Reverend Thompson was saying. After the service, as the congregation milled about in the sunshine outside, Vincent made his way through the crowd to her side. He greeted her father respectfully, then offered Helena his arm. Ready for that walk, Miss Jensen? Very ready, Mr. Garrett, she replied, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. They walked through Aspen streets, heading toward the river that ran along the eastern edge of town. It was a beautiful day, warm but not too hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine from the mountains. Helena was acutely aware of Vincent beside her, of the strength in the arm beneath her hand, of the way people nodded and smiled as they passed, clearly approving of what they saw. At the river, they found a spot beneath a stand of aspens, the trees that gave the town its name. The leaves rustled overhead, creating dappled patterns of light and shadow that danced across the grass. They sat together, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and watched the water flow past. I have been thinking about you all week, Vincent said quietly. I know that might be too forward to say, but it is the truth. I cannot seem to get you out of my mind. Helena's breath caught. I have been thinking about you too, she admitted. Constantly. It feels strange, does it not? We hardly know each other, and yet it feels like I've known you forever, Vincent finished, like I was just waiting to find you without even realizing I was looking. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made Helena's pulse race. Miss Jensen, Helena, I know this is sudden. I know we have only just met, but I have never been one to dance around things or pretend I do not feel what I feel. I care about you, more than I have any right to after such a short time, and I would like very much to court you properly, if you would allow it. Helena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears, born of relief and joy and the realization that what she had been feeling was not one-sided. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Vincent, I would like that very much. He reached for her hand, holding it carefully in both of his own. I do not have much to offer you right now. I'm just a ranch hand with some savings and a lot of dreams, but I'm a hard worker and I'm honest, and I promise I would do everything in my power to make you happy. You are already making me happy, Helena said softly, just by being here, by being you. I do not need grand gestures or promises of wealth. I need someone who is kind and true, someone who will stand beside me as a partner. I think you might be that person, Vincent Garrett. I will do my best to prove you right, he said. And then, very carefully, very gently, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was Helena's first real kiss, and it was everything she'd imagined and more. Soft and sweet and full of promise, it felt like a beginning and a homecoming all at once. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, their foreheads resting together as they shared breath and space and the fragile, powerful thing growing between them. The courtship that followed was conducted with proper decorum but unmistakable intensity. Vincent came to town every Sunday without fail, and often on Wednesday evenings as well, making the 10-mile round trip from the ranch just to spend a few hours in Helena's company. They took walks, attended church socials, sat together in the boarding house parlor under her father's approving eye. Harold Jensen made no secret of his approval of Vincent. "That is a man who knows his own mind," he told Helena one evening after Vincent had left. "A man with character and principle. Your mother would have liked him." As summer turned to autumn, Vincent and Helena's relationship deepened into something that felt unshakable. They talked about everything, sharing their hopes and fears, their memories and dreams. Vincent told her about the land he had been saving for, a section of property up valley from Aspen that came with water rights and good grazing. Helena shared her carefully kept household accounts, showing him how she managed the boarding house finances, proving that she could be a true partner in building a life together. The physical aspect of their courtship remained carefully restrained, limited to chaste kisses and hand-holding, but the emotional and intellectual connection between them grew stronger with each passing week. They challenged each other's thinking, supported each other's dreams, and found in each other a perfect complement to their own strengths and weaknesses. It was in late October, with the aspens turned to gold and the first real cold settling into the high country, that Vincent asked Harold for permission to marry Helena. They were in Harold's small office at the boarding house, and Vincent's hands were steady despite the importance of the moment. "Mr. Jensen, I love your daughter with everything I am," Vincent said firmly. "I know I am not wealthy, and I know my prospects are still more promise than reality. But I am a hard worker, and I have been saving every penny I can spare. I have enough to make a down payment on that land I told you about, enough to start building something real. More importantly, I would spend every day of my life making sure Helena is happy and safe and valued as she deserves." Harold looked at Vincent for a long moment, his expression serious. Then he smiled, extending his hand. "You have my blessing, Vincent. More than that, you have my gratitude. Helena has been the center of my world since her mother died, and I've been worried about what would happen when she found someone of her own. But you are a good man, and I trust you to take care of her." "Thank you, sir," Vincent said, relief and joy evident in his face. "Thank you." That evening, Vincent took Helena back to their spot by the river, even though the air was cold enough to see their breath. He had brought a blanket, which he wrapped around both their shoulders as they sat together under the stars. "Helena," he said, his voice carrying a nervous edge she had never heard before. "These past few months have been the happiest of my life. You have brought light and warmth and meaning to days that used to just be about work and survival. You have made me believe in the possibility of something better, something more." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This belonged to my mother. My uncle saved it for me, told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I would be honored if you would wear it." Inside the box was a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire, the stone deep blue and catching the moonlight. It was not ostentatious or expensive, but it was beautiful in its simplicity, and Helena felt tears spill down her cheeks as Vincent took it from the box. "Helena Jensen, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, Vincent, of course I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Then he pulled her close and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and commitment into that moment, and Helena kissed him back with equal fervor, no longer constrained by the careful propriety of their courtship. They were married in December, on a clear, cold day when the mountains stood out sharp and bright against a sky of impossible blue. The wedding was held in the Aspen church, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Helena wore a dress of cream-colored silk, that her father had insisted on buying for her, with lace at the collar and cuffs that she had carefully selected. Vincent wore a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable until Helena smiled at him, and then his face relaxed into pure joy. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony, his words about commitment and partnership resonating deeply with both bride and groom. When Vincent said his vows, his voice was strong and sure, his eyes never leaving Helena's face. When Helena spoke her promises in return, she felt the truth of them settle into her bones, a conviction that this was right, that this was meant to be. The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by Helena Jensen, whose tears were unashamed, and by the Crawford family from the ranch, and by the boarders from the house, and by dozens of friends and neighbors who had watched this courtship unfold and recognized true love when they saw it. The reception was held at the boarding house, which Harold had insisted upon. Long tables groaned under the weight of food that Helena and several neighbor women had prepared. There was dancing to fiddle music provided by a prospector who proved surprisingly talented, and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to humorous, and laughter that filled every corner of the house. As evening fell, Vincent and Helena slipped away to the small cottage that sat behind the boarding house. Harold had quietly renovated it over the past month, turning what had been storage space into a cozy home perfect for newlyweds. It was their temporary residence until Vincent's new ranch house could be completed in the spring, and Helena had made it beautiful with curtains and quilts and small touches that turned bare walls into a home. That first night as husband and wife was tender and somewhat awkward, as first times often are, but it was also filled with love and patience and the determination to learn together how to bring each other pleasure and comfort. Vincent was gentle with Helena, mindful of her inexperience, and she was brave in her vulnerability, trusting him completely with this most intimate part of herself. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the wedding quilt Helena's mother had made years ago, talking softly about their future. Vincent traced patterns on Helena's shoulder with his fingertips as he described the ranch house he wanted to build, with a big kitchen for her cooking and wide windows to let in the mountain light. Helena spoke about the garden she would plant, about keeping chickens and maybe a milk cow, about creating a home that would welcome their children someday. "How many children do you want?" Vincent asked, his voice warm with contentment. "At least 3, Helena said. Maybe 4. I always wished I had siblings growing up. I want our children to have brothers and sisters, to never feel alone." 3 or 4 sounds perfect, Vincent agreed. "We will fill that ranch house with noise and laughter." Winter passed in a haze of happiness. Vincent continued working at the Double Creek Ranch, but he spent his free hours working on his own land, cutting timber for the new house with the help of some of the other ranch hands who had become his friends. Helena managed the boarding house alongside her father, but she also began collecting supplies for her new home, piecing together the household goods she would need. They spent their nights in the cottage, learning each other's bodies and hearts with increasing skill and deepening intimacy. What had been awkward became natural, what had been new became familiar, and their physical relationship became another strong thread binding them together. In February, Helena missed her monthly courses. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely, but when March came with the same absence, she knew with growing certainty that she was carrying Vincent's child. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She wanted this, wanted to give Vincent children and build a family, but she was also aware of the risks that came with childbirth, especially in this frontier territory where medical care was limited. She told Vincent one evening as they sat together by the small stove in their cottage. He had been describing progress on the ranch house, which was now framed and roofed, and she interrupted him with words that came out in a rush. "Vincent, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, like sunrise breaking over the mountains, a smile spread across his face. "Truly? We are going to be parents?" "Truly," Helena confirmed, and then she was in his arms, held tight against his chest as he laughed with pure delight. "When? How are you feeling? Do you need to see the doctor? Are you well?" The questions tumbled out of him. "I think sometime in early October, based on my calculations," Helena said, laughing at his excitement. "I feel well mostly, a bit queasy in the mornings, but the doctor says that is normal. And yes, I've already seen Dr. Patterson. He says everything looks good so far." Vincent pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks with exquisite gentleness. I love you, Helena Garrett. You have already given me more happiness than I ever dreamed possible, and now you are giving me a child. I swear I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already deserve me, Helena said firmly, and I love you too, more than I have words to express. The news spread quickly through Aspen, greeted with congratulations and good wishes from everyone who knew them. Harold Jensen was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandfather, and he began planning immediately how they would convert one of the smaller rooms in the boarding house into a nursery for when Helena came to visit. Spring brought rapid progress on the ranch house. With the weather warming, Vincent was able to work longer hours and the interior began to take shape. He installed the wide windows he had promised, positioned to capture the best views of the surrounding mountains. He built kitchen counters to Helena's exact specifications, having measured the height that would be comfortable for her to work at. He crafted a mantelpiece for the fireplace from a beautiful piece of oak, carving their initials and wedding date into the wood. By June, the house was ready, and they moved in on a bright Saturday morning. Helena walked through each room slowly, touching the walls Vincent had plastered smooth, running her hands along the windowsills he had sanded to perfection. Everything spoke of his labor and his love, of his vision for their future together. It is perfect, she told him, turning to find him watching her with anxious hope. Vincent, it is absolutely perfect. The relief on his face made her smile. You are sure? If there is anything you want changed, I can fix it. I would not change a single thing, Helena assured him. This is our home, built by your hands for our family. It is more than I ever dreamed of. They settled into ranch life with surprising ease. Vincent's cattle herd, purchased with his savings and a carefully structured loan from the bank, grazed peacefully on the good grassland that came with the property. Helena established her garden, planted chickens, and transformed the house into a home with curtains and quilts and the accumulated treasures of their life together. Her father visited weekly, making the trip from town on his sturdy gelding, always arriving with some small gift or treat for his daughter and son-in-law. As Helena's pregnancy advanced, Vincent became increasingly protective. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, not climb ladders, not overtire herself. It was sweet, but sometimes frustrating, and they had their first real argument when Helena wanted to help with the haying, and Vincent absolutely refused to allow it. I am pregnant, not made of glass, Helena said with exasperation. Women have been working through pregnancies since the beginning of time. Not my wife, Vincent said stubbornly. Not with my child. I will not risk either of you, Helena. Please, let me do the heavy work. There is plenty you can do that does not involve physical labor. They compromised, as they were learning to do. Helena agreed to limit her physical work, and Vincent agreed to stop hovering quite so obviously. But underneath the argument was love, pure and simple, each of them trying to protect what they cherished most. In early October, just as the aspens were turning golden again, Helena went into labor. Vincent rode for Dr. Patterson, while one of the neighboring ranch wives, Martha Williams, stayed with Helena. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Vincent paced outside the bedroom door, tormented by every sound of Helena's pain, feeling helpless and terrified. Finally, in the afternoon of that second day, a baby's cry pierced the air. Vincent burst through the door to find Dr. Patterson cleaning a red-faced, squalling infant, while Martha tended to Helena, who lay pale and exhausted against the pillows. You have a son, Dr. Patterson said with a smile, a big, healthy boy with good lungs, as you can hear. Vincent moved to Helena's side, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. Are you well? Please tell me you are well. I'm tired, Helena said with a weak but genuine smile, and sore. But I'm well, Vincent. We did it. We made a baby. The doctor placed the cleaned and swaddled infant in Helena's arms, and Vincent got his first real look at his son. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, his tiny fists waving. He was red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. What should we name him? Vincent asked softly, one finger gently stroking his son's impossibly soft cheek. I was thinking William, Helena said. William Harold Garrett, after my father, if that is acceptable to you. William Harold Garrett, Vincent repeated, testing the name. It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. I am the luckiest man alive. William proved to be a healthy, robust child who filled the ranch house with noise and life. He had Vincent's blue-green eyes and Helena's dark hair, and as he grew, he showed signs of having inherited his father's easy temperament and his mother's sharp intelligence. Vincent was a devoted father, often carrying William with him as he did ranch work, talking to the baby as if he could understand every word. Helena Jensen was a frequent visitor, utterly besotted with his grandson. He would sit for hours holding William, telling him stories about his grandmother, about the journey west, about the importance of family and integrity. Helena would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love and gratitude. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and love. The ranch prospered modestly but steadily, Vincent's careful management and hard work paying dividends. They added to their herd gradually, expanding only as resources allowed, building a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Helena's garden flourished, providing more vegetables than they could use themselves, and she began selling her excess produce in town, adding to their income. When William was 2 years old, Helena became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because her body knew what to expect, and in the spring of 1886 she gave birth to twin daughters. They named them Rose Margaret and Lily Catherine, after flowers that bloomed in Helena's garden and Vincent's long-deceased mother. The twins were identical in appearance, but different in temperament from the start. Rose was bold and adventurous, while Lily was quieter, more contemplative. Together, they were a whirlwind, keeping both parents constantly busy, but filling the house with laughter and joy. Vincent proved as devoted a father to his daughters as he was to his son. He braided their hair with surprising gentleness for such large hands, told them stories before bed, carried them on his shoulders when they grew tired during family walks. Helena would watch him with their children and fall in love with him all over again, marveling at the tenderness this strong, capable man showed to the smallest members of his family. The ranch continued to grow as the children grew. They added a barn, expanded the house with 2 more bedrooms, bought more land when it became available. Vincent hired seasonal help during busy times, young men from town who were trying to save money or learn the ranching trade. He treated them fairly, paid them well, and several of them returned year after year, becoming like extended family. Helena Jensen remained a constant presence in their lives until the spring of 1889, when a sudden fever took him quickly and without warning. His death devastated Helena, bringing back all the grief of losing her mother years before. She clung to Vincent through the funeral and the days that followed, and he held her through her tears with the same steady strength he had shown that first day when he stopped her runaway buggy. "He loved you so much," Vincent told her one night as they lay together in their bed, Helena's tears soaking his shirt. "He was so proud of you, of the life we have built, of our children. He told me once that meeting me was an answer to prayer, that he had worried about leaving you alone, but that knowing you had me gave him peace." "I miss him so much," Helena whispered, "and I miss my mother. I wish they could have been here longer, could have seen the children grow up." "They are watching over us," Vincent said with conviction. "I truly believe that, and we are honoring them by living good lives, by raising our children with the values they taught us, by building something that will last beyond our own time." Helena knew he was right, and gradually her grief eased into something more manageable, a permanent tender spot in her heart, but no longer a crushing weight. They sold the boarding house, using the proceeds to pay off their remaining debts and expand the ranch further. The business had been her father's dream, but it was not hers, and she felt no regret in letting it go. In 1891, when William was 7 and the twins were 5, Helena gave birth to another son. They named him Henry James Garrett, and he completed their family with his sunny disposition and infectious laugh. 4 children felt exactly right, creating the large, lively family Helena had always dreamed of. The children grew up healthy and happy, schooled at home by Helena, who proved to be an excellent teacher. She used her mother's old books, supplemented by new ones ordered from Denver, and taught them not just reading and arithmetic, but also music and poetry and the love of learning for its own sake. Vincent taught them practical skills, showing William and eventually Henry how to ride and rope and manage cattle, teaching all 4 children to shoot and hunt and survive in the wilderness if necessary. Rose, despite being a girl, showed no interest in staying inside and learning domestic skills. She wanted to be out with her father and brother, working cattle and riding horses. Helena and Vincent discussed it and decided to let her follow her inclinations, recognizing that their daughter had a gift for working with animals that would be wasted if suppressed. Lily, in contrast, loved helping her mother in the kitchen and garden, showing an early talent for cooking that delighted Helena. The ranch became known throughout the area as one of the best-run operations in the valley. Vincent's reputation for honesty and hard work opened doors, and he was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association board, helping to set grazing policies and resolve disputes between ranchers. Helena became known for her hospitality, and their dinner table frequently hosted neighbors, business associates, and travelers who needed a meal and a place to rest. As the children entered their teenage years, Vincent and Helena found themselves reflecting on how far they had come from that afternoon when a panicked horse had nearly cost Helena her life. It seemed like both yesterday and a lifetime ago, that moment when their eyes had first met, and something fundamental had shifted in both their worlds. "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked him one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "Marrying me, taking on all this responsibility, giving up the freedom of a single man?" Vincent looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Regret? Helena, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children are the reason I get up in the morning, the reason everything I do has meaning. How could I possibly regret the greatest blessing of my life?" "I just wanted to make sure," Helena said with a smile, leaning into his shoulder. "Sometimes I look around at our life and cannot quite believe it is real, that I am this happy, that we have built all this together. It seems almost too good to be true." "It is real," Vincent assured her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "We made it real through hard work and love and commitment, and it is going to keep being real for the rest of our lives." William grew into a young man who was the image of his father, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same steady competence that made people trust him instinctively. At 18, he was essentially running the ranch alongside Vincent, making decisions and managing the hands with a maturity beyond his years. But he was also interested in education, in learning more than the practical skills of ranching, and Vincent and Helena encouraged him to attend the new school that had opened in Glenwood Springs, studying agriculture and business. The twins, at 16, were blossoming into beautiful young women who handled the attention with very different approaches. Rose treated her suitors with friendly dismissal, more interested in working with horses than in romance. Lily was more receptive, but also more particular, looking for someone who shared her interests and values, rather than being swayed by flattery or appearance. Helena watched them navigate young womanhood and felt pride mixed with wistful recognition of how quickly time was passing. Henry, at 13, was still very much a boy, all energy and enthusiasm and grand plans. He wanted to be a rancher like his father, but he also talked about exploring, about seeing the wider world beyond Colorado. Vincent and Helena listened to his dreams and supported them, knowing that whatever path he chose, they had given him the foundation to succeed. In 1899, Vincent and Helena celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together their whole community. Friends and neighbors filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard, sharing food and music and stories. William came home from school for the occasion, bringing with him a young woman named Sarah, whom he introduced with obvious pride. The twins performed a song they had practiced in secret, their voices blending beautifully. Henry gave a toast that was both humorous and heartfelt, making everyone laugh and then tear up. As Vincent and Helena stood together, surrounded by their children and friends, they reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. A panicked horse, a life saved, a love discovered. From that single afternoon had grown this entire life, this family, this legacy. "Thank you," Helena said to Vincent, her voice for his ears alone despite the crowd around them. "For what?" he asked, pulling her closer. "For being in the right place at that exact moment all those years ago, for stopping my runaway buggy, for saving my life, and then filling it with more love than I ever imagined possible." I would do it again in a heartbeat, Vincent said, kissing her forehead. Every single moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose it all again because it led to this, to you, to our children, to the life we have built together. I love you, Vincent Garrett, Helena said, the same words she had spoken countless times over their years together, but which never lost their power or truth. I love you too, Helena Garrett, he replied, as he always did, as he always would. The new century arrived with celebrations throughout Colorado and across the nation. At the Garrett Ranch, they marked the occasion with a family dinner. All 6 of them gathered around the table that Vincent had built with his own hands nearly 2 decades earlier. They talked about the past and the future, about the changes they had seen, and the changes still to come. William announced his engagement to Sarah, planning a wedding for the following summer. Rose declared her intention to start breeding horses, having saved enough money to purchase several quality mares. Lily showed them sketches for a tea room she wanted to open in Aspen, combining her love of cooking with her head for business. Henry talked about maybe going to university, about studying engineering or geology, about building things that would last beyond his own lifetime. Helena and Vincent listened to their children's dreams with pride and support, recognizing that each of them was equipped to face whatever the new century would bring. They had done their job as parents, had given their children the foundation of love and values and practical skills they would need to build their own lives. As the years continued to pass, the Garrett Ranch remained a constant in a changing world. Cars began to appear on the roads alongside horses. Telephones connected distant places in ways that would have seemed magical just decades before. The silver mines that had built Aspen played out, and the town transformed from a mining camp into a quieter, more settled community. Through all these changes, Vincent and Helena's love remained steady. They grew older together, their faces weathering like the wood of their ranch house, their bodies slowing but their hearts still beating in synchronization. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree branch and grow, each new generation adding to the legacy that had begun with a panicked horse and a cowboy's courage. William took over running the ranch gradually, with Vincent transitioning from active management to advisory role with grace and relief. Rose's horse breeding operation became renowned throughout Colorado, producing animals known for their intelligence and stamina. Lily's tea room in Aspen became a beloved gathering place, famous for food that tasted like home and welcome that felt genuine. Henry earned his engineering degree and worked on dam projects throughout the West, always returning home for holidays and important family gatherings. In their later years, Vincent and Helena often sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset over mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. They held hands like young lovers, their fingers intertwined with the comfortable fit of decades of practice. They talked sometimes, sharing memories or observations, but often they simply sat in companionable silence, needing no words to communicate what they felt. "It has been a good life," Helena said one evening, her voice soft with contentment. "The best life," Vincent agreed. "I would not change a single moment." "Not even the scary ones? The times when the cattle prices dropped or the drought threatened everything we had built?" Helena asked with gentle teasing in her voice. "Not even those," Vincent said firmly, "because we faced them together, and coming through them made us stronger. Every challenge we overcame proved that we could handle whatever came next." "I am glad that snake spooked Daisy that day," Helena said, something she had told Vincent many times over the years but which bore repeating. "I'm glad the buggy ran away with me, glad you were there to stop it. Because if none of that had happened, I never would have met you. Never would have had this life, these children, all this love." "I am glad, too," Vincent said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it with the same reverence he had shown on their wedding day. "Though I would have preferred a less terrifying way for us to meet. You took years off my life with your fear that afternoon. But you saved me," Helena reminded him. "You risked your own life to save mine before you even knew my name. That is who you are, Vincent. That is the man I fell in love with, the man I have loved every day since." They sat together as the sky deepened from blue to purple to black, as the stars emerged one by one, like diamonds scattered across velvet. Inside the house that Vincent had built for his bride so many years ago, they could hear the sounds of family, of grandchildren visiting, of life continuing in the space they had created. Vincent and Helena Garrett lived to see the 1920s, to witness their golden wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family. The party was held at the ranch, just as their 17th anniversary had been, but this time the crowd was even larger, the circle of love even wider. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to honor them, to celebrate a love that had endured and deepened over 50 years. During the toast, William stood and spoke for all the family. "My parents taught us many things," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "They taught us the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, the power of perseverance. But most of all, they taught us about love. They showed us, through their daily example, what it means to truly commit to another person, to build a life together through good times and hard times, to never give up on each other or on the family you create together. They are the foundation on which all of us stand, and we are grateful beyond words for their example." Helena cried happy tears as she listened, leaning into Vincent's solid presence beside her. They had built something that would last, something that reached beyond themselves into the future. Their love, born in a moment of crisis on a dusty Colorado road, had become the cornerstone of a legacy that would endure for generations. In their final years, when age had slowed them both and confined them mostly to their beloved porch, Vincent and Helena still held hands and watched the mountains together. They spoke often of the past, of that first afternoon when everything had changed, of the life they had built from that single moment of connection. "I have loved you every day," Vincent told her, his voice wavering with age but still strong with conviction. "From that first moment when I saw you in that runaway buggy, terrified and brave, I knew you were someone special. And every day since has only confirmed that first impression. You are the love of my life, Helena. You are my heart." "And you are mine," Helena replied, her aged hand gripping his with all the strength she could muster. "You saved my life that day, Vincent. But you did not just save it. You filled it with purpose and joy and love beyond measure. You gave me children and grandchildren, a home and a family, a partnership that has been the greatest blessing of my existence. I love you, my darling. I will always love you." Vincent Garrett passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1925, with Helena beside him as she had been for 57 years. He was 82 years old, and had lived to see his family flourish and his ranch prosper. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched through his integrity, generosity, and quiet strength. Helena grieved deeply, but without despair. She knew that their love was not ended, merely transformed. She lived for 2 more years, surrounded by her children and their families, still sharp of mind even as her body failed. She spent her final days in the room she had shared with Vincent, looking out at the mountains they had loved together, holding the hands of her children and telling them stories of their father. When Helena died in the autumn of 1927, it was with a smile on her face and Vincent's name on her lips. She was buried beside him in the Aspen Cemetery, under a simple stone that bore both their names and the dates of their lives. But their true monument was not stone. It was the thriving family they had created, the ranch that still operated under William's management, the love they had demonstrated through their daily lives together. The story of how they met, of the runaway buggy and the cowboy who saved Helena's life that afternoon, became part of family lore. It was told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that the greatest loves often begin in unexpected moments, that courage and kindness can change the entire trajectory of a life, and that what you build together matters far more than what you start with. Vincent and Helena Garrett's love story began with a panicked horse on a July afternoon in 1882. It grew through courtship and marriage, deepened through the challenges of building a life on the frontier, and matured into a partnership that lasted until death parted them. They raised 4 children who became strong, capable adults. They built a ranch that prospered for generations. They created a legacy of love and integrity that rippled outward through dozens of lives. But perhaps most importantly, they proved that true love, the kind that lasts a lifetime, is built not in grand gestures, but in daily choices, in choosing each other again and again through every challenge and every joy, in standing together against whatever life threw at them, in building something beautiful and lasting from the foundation of that first moment when their eyes met and their hearts recognized something that would change everything. The ranch still stands today, run by Vincent and Helena's descendants, a testament to what two people can build when they love truly and work together toward a common dream. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the aspen trees and the mountains turn purple in the fading light, you can almost see them there on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, their love still present in the place they made home. That is the legacy of the day. Helena Jensen's buggy ran away behind a panicked horse. That is the story of how Vincent Garrett saved not just her life, but gave her a life worth saving. That is the testament to a love that began in crisis, grew through commitment, and endured beyond death itself. It is a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth honoring. Because love like theirs, true and deep and lasting, is the greatest legacy any two people can leave behind.